The morning sun peeked through the large windows of Bluebird Cafe, casting a warm glow on the polished wooden tables and sleek modern decor. The aroma of freshly ground coffee beans and buttery croissants filled the air as customers shuffled in, many still yawning and checking their phones while waiting in line for their morning fix. Behind the counter, Shanice Thompson gracefully moved between the espresso machine and the display case, her bright purple apron showing a few coffee stains from the morning rush. At just 23, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had mastered the art of multitasking. While steaming milk for a cappuccino, she managed to greet regulars by name and remember their usual orders, a skill that had earned her plenty of loyal customers over her 2 years at the cafe. "Good morning, Mr. Chen." The usual dark roast with a splash of oat milk, she called out cheerfully to an elderly gentleman who had just walked in. He nodded with a warm smile, already pulling out his loyalty card. These little interactions were what made her job worthwhile, even though her feet ached from standing for hours and her hands were slightly rough from constant washing. Between serving customers, Shanice would sneak quick glances at her nursing textbook, which sat hidden beneath the counter. Working full-time while pursuing her dream of becoming a nurse wasn't easy, but she was determined to make it work. Her colleagues often marveled at how she maintained her composure during the busiest hours, never letting the pressure show on her face. The morning crowd at Bluebird wasn't your typical coffee shop bunch. Located in the heart of the financial district, the cafe attracted a mix of suited executives, creative professionals, and local business owners. The interior design reflected this upscale clientele, with its exposed brick walls, hanging plants, and artwork from local artists. The prices matched the ambience, but customers felt it was worth it for both the quality and the service. Shanice had just finished wiping down the counter when her coworker Lisa nudged her. "Hey, you're still coming to study group tonight, right? We can grab dinner first at that new noodle place." This was their routine, supporting each other through long shifts and longer study sessions. The two had started working at Bluebird around the same time and had quickly become close friends, sharing dreams of graduating and moving up in their careers. As the morning rush began to slow, Shanice took a moment to restock the coffee sleeves and check the pastry display. The cafe had a strict policy about freshness, and she prided herself on maintaining their high standards. Regular customers often commented that it was her attention to detail and genuine care that made their morning coffee run special. Little did she know that this ordinary Tuesday was about to become anything but typical. The peaceful atmosphere of Bluebird Cafe was about to be shattered by an incident that would not only change her life, but would spark a conversation that would reach far beyond the cafe's brick walls. The bell above the cafe door chimed at exactly 9:30 a.m. The sound was ordinary, but the woman who walked in was anything but. Victoria Blackwood's heels clicked against the hardwood floor like a countdown timer. Everyone in the cafe could smell her expensive perfume, the kind you only find in stores where they don't display price tags. She was dressed in what looked like a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her perfectly styled blonde hair bouncing with each step. Her face was flawless, the kind of flawless that comes from regular visits to the most expensive skincare clinics in the city. But there was something cold in her eyes, something that didn't match the polished smile she wore for her social media posts. Victoria was what people called a digital influencer, with 500,000 followers who hung on her every word about luxury lifestyle tips and high-end fashion advice. Her phone was permanently attached to her hand, ready to capture every moment that might be worth sharing with her devoted audience. What her followers didn't see were the moments when the camera wasn't rolling. Her assistant, a nervous-looking young woman clutching an iPad, scurried behind her like a shadow. Those who worked closely with Victoria knew to stay at least 3 steps behind her, close enough to hear her commands, but far enough to avoid her sudden mood swings. The assistant's eyes darted around anxiously, probably already anticipating what might go wrong today. "Clear that table," Victoria snapped at her assistant, pointing to a corner spot by the window where an elderly couple was still finishing their breakfast. The assistant froze, caught between her boss's demand and basic human decency. Fortunately, the couple had already started gathering their things, pretending not to hear the rudeness in Victoria's voice. While waiting for her chosen table, Victoria pulled out her phone and started live streaming. "Good morning, darlings," her voice suddenly dripping with honey. "I'm at this adorable little cafe that everyone's been raving about. You know me, always searching for the next hidden gem to share with my lovely followers." The regular customers exchanged knowing looks. They'd seen people like her before. Social media celebrities who treated real life like their personal movie set. Some pulled out their own phones, curious about what might unfold. In their experience, people who acted like they owned the world often provided the most interesting stories to tell later. Victoria's reputation preceded her in certain circles. She sat on the boards of 3 different charities, but rumors swirled about how she talked down to the very people these charities were supposed to help. She owned one of the city's top real estate agencies, but her employees had a habit of quitting within months. Still, she maintained a pristine public image, at least until now. As she settled into her seat, arranging her designer bag and phone for the perfect casual photo, she raised her perfectly manicured hand to signal for service. The way she snapped her fingers made several nearby customers wince. The cafe suddenly felt colder, as if a storm cloud had drifted in through the door with her. Meanwhile, Shanice was behind the counter, completely unaware that she was about to serve the most difficult customer of her career. She simply saw another customer who needed her attention, and with her usual warm smile, she grabbed her notepad and headed toward Victoria's table. The moment Shanice approached Victoria's table, the air seemed to grow thick with tension. Victoria didn't even look up from her phone, still recording her live stream while rattling off her complicated coffee order. "I'll have a large sugar-free vanilla latte, extra hot, with almond milk, and make sure it's unsweetened almond milk, not that cheap stuff most places use." Shanice wrote everything down carefully, making sure to get each detail right. "Would you like anything else with your coffee today?" she asked with her usual friendly smile. Victoria finally looked up, her eyes scanning Shanice from head to toe in a way that made several nearby customers uncomfortable. "Just make sure you get the order right," Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I can't have anything affecting my morning routine." Her assistant shifted nervously in her seat, already sensing what might be coming. Back behind the counter, Shanice prepared the drink with extra care. She'd dealt with demanding customers before. It came with the territory in an upscale cafe. She steamed the milk to the perfect temperature, carefully measured the sugar-free syrup, and made sure everything was exactly as ordered. When the drink was ready, Shanice carried it to Victoria's table. The coffee was perfect, the ideal temperature, a beautiful layer of foam on top, even a little leaf design that Shanice was known for creating. But sometimes, even perfection isn't enough for some people. Victoria took one sip and her face twisted into a scowl. "This isn't almond milk," she declared loudly, causing several heads to turn. Shanice's heart sank. She knew for certain she'd use almond milk, but before she could explain, Victoria's voice rose even higher. "I specifically asked for almond milk. Do you know how many calories are in regular milk? Are you trying to ruin my entire day?" Victoria stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her live stream was still going, capturing everything, but she seemed too angry to care. Shanice remained calm, her voice steady. "Ma'am, I assured you I use almond milk. I can make you another drink if you'd like." But before she could finish her sentence, Victoria did something that would change both their lives forever. In one swift motion, Victoria lifted the nearly full cup of coffee and threw it directly at Shanice. The hot liquid splashed across her uniform and skin. The cafe fell completely silent, except for the sound of the cup clattering on the floor and Victoria's continued yelling. The other customers sat frozen in shock. The elderly couple from earlier had their mouths open in horror. A young man at the counter had his phone out, recording everything. Victoria's own live stream was still running, broadcasting her behavior to thousands of followers in real time. Through it all, Shanice stood there, coffee dripping from her apron, her skin stinging from the heat. But what happened next would surprise everyone. Instead of yelling back or breaking down, she straightened her shoulders and maintained her composure. Her voice was steady but firm as she said, "I'll get the manager for you." Victoria, still fuming, didn't realize that her carefully constructed public image was crumbling with each passing second. Her assistant had shrunk into her chair, trying to become invisible, while nearby customers were already typing furiously on their phones, sharing what they just witnessed. In those few seconds, as Shanice walked away with as much dignity as anyone could muster in that situation, the wheels of karma had already begun to turn. And they were about to turn much faster than Victoria could have ever imagined. Among the shocked customers that morning was a well-known tech blogger named Andy Chen. He'd been quietly working on his laptop in the corner when everything unfolded. Without hesitation, he'd captured the entire incident on his phone, from Victoria's initial outburst to the coffee-throwing moment. His hands were actually shaking as he watched the footage back, hardly believing what he just recorded. Next to him sat a woman in a crisp business suit, who everyone would later learn was Mrs. Rodriguez, one of the city's top civil rights attorneys. She'd been enjoying her morning bagel when the chaos erupted. Now, she was already pulling out her business card, her breakfast forgotten. Did everyone see that? A young college student broke the stunned silence, his voice trembling with anger. She just threw hot coffee at her. Others began murmuring, their shock turning into action. Phones appeared everywhere, recording Victoria's continuing rant and Shanice's dignified exit. Victoria seemed oblivious to the sea of cameras pointed at her. Her own live stream was still running, broadcasting her behavior to her horrified followers. Comments were flooding in faster than anyone could read them. Did she really just do that? This is disgusting. Someone needs to do something. The cafe's regular morning customers, who had watched Shanice work tirelessly with a smile for months, were especially upset. An elderly woman who came in every morning for her chamomile tea was already on the phone with local news stations. A group of office workers who grabbed their coffee there daily were posting the video clips to their social media accounts. "I've been coming here for 2 years," one businessman said loudly, standing up from his table. "That young lady has never been anything but professional and kind." Others nodded in agreement, their voices joining in a chorus of support for Shanice. Andy Chen was already typing furiously on his laptop. As a tech blogger with a significant following, he knew this story needed to be told. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he described not just what had happened, but the context. How Shanice had always remembered his complicated order. How she studied her nursing books during quiet moments. How she helped elderly customers carry their drinks to their tables. Mrs. Rodriguez quietly walked to the back of the cafe where Shanice had disappeared. She wasn't doing this for publicity or social media attention. She genuinely wanted to help. As a woman who had fought discrimination cases for 20 years, she recognized this moment for what it was. A clear example of the prejudice that still existed in their society. Meanwhile, Victoria's assistant had finally found her voice. "Ms. Blackwood, your live stream. It's still on." She pointed nervously at the phone, which was indeed still broadcasting everything to Victoria's 500,000 followers. The comments were coming in so fast now that the screen was just a blur of angry reactions. Some customers had gathered near the counter, telling the cafe manager they would be happy to provide witness statements. Others were already sharing the videos with local news stations. In the age of social media, news traveled fast. But this story was about to travel faster than anyone expected. The incident had lasted less than 5 minutes, but its impact would be felt for months to come. As the morning sun continued to stream through the cafe windows, no one realized they were witnessing the beginning of a story that would soon grip the entire city. In the back room of the cafe, Shanice's coworker Lisa was helping her clean up, gently dabbing at the coffee stains on her uniform with a damp cloth. Despite the burning sensation on her skin, Shanice remained remarkably composed. "I've dealt with rude customers before," she said quietly, "but nothing like this." The cafe manager, Mr. Thompson, a kind-faced man in his 50s who had run the place for over a decade, was on the phone with the police. His face was red with anger, not at Shanice, but at the situation. "I've got security footage," he was saying, "and about 20 witnesses with video evidence." Meanwhile, out in the main cafe area, Victoria's rage hadn't subsided. If anything, the presence of recording phones seemed to fuel her anger even more. "Do you know who I am?" she shouted, now directing her fury at everyone and no one in particular. "I'll have this place shut down. I'll make sure none of you ever work in this city again." Her assistant had given up trying to calm her down and was frantically texting someone, probably Victoria's PR team, who would soon have the biggest crisis of their careers to handle. The poor woman looked like she wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. The elderly couple who had witnessed everything were comforting the young student who was visibly shaking. "In all my 70 years," the older gentleman said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "I never thought I'd see someone treat another human being like that." A group of regular customers had formed a protective barrier between Victoria and the door to the back room where Shanice was. They weren't being aggressive. They were just making it clear that no more harm would come to their favorite barista today. One customer, a nurse who often chatted with Shanice about her nursing school dreams, was already examining the burns on Shanice's arms. "We should document these," she said professionally, taking photos of the reddened skin. "Even mild burns can be serious." Victoria's live-stream comments had exploded. Her loyal followers, who had watched her project a perfectly curated image of elegance and sophistication for years, were witnessing a very different side of their idol. Many were already unfollowing her in real time. "You're still streaming," someone in the cafe pointed out loudly. Victoria finally looked at her phone, and for the first time, a flicker of fear crossed her face. She tried to end the live stream, but it was too late. Thousands had already recorded it. Mr. Thompson emerged from the back room, his voice firm but controlled. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The police are on their way, and will be pressing charges for assault." The cafe erupted in approving murmurs. Victoria's face changed from rage to disbelief. She looked around, suddenly seeming to realize that everyone in the cafe was recording her. Her perfectly crafted public image was cracking like a mirror, showing the true reflection beneath. "This isn't over," she snapped, grabbing her designer bag. But as she turned to leave, she found her path blocked by Mrs. Rodriguez, the civil rights attorney, who simply handed her a business card with a stern look that said everything without saying anything at all. Outside, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The morning sun that had seemed so peaceful earlier now felt like a spotlight, illuminating a scene that would soon be shared across every social media platform in the city. Victoria's day of reckoning was just beginning. The internet moves fast, but this story moved faster. Within an hour of the incident, Andy Chen's video had already been shared thousands of times. His blog post, titled "Local Business Owner Shows True Colors at Cafe," was spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. People who had been in the cafe that morning couldn't stop checking their phones. The hashtag coffee cruelty was trending locally, then nationally. Comments flooded in from everywhere. "This is how she treats people when she thinks no one's watching." "Stand with Shanice." "Time to cancel Victoria Blackwood." Someone had dug up Victoria's old social media posts. Perfectly staged photos of her at charity events, captions preaching about kindness and equality. The contrast between these polished posts and the viral video of her throwing coffee was striking. Internet users were quick to point out the hypocrisy. "Remember last month when she gave that speech about workplace respect?" One user posted, sharing a clip from a business conference where Victoria had talked about treating employees with dignity. The irony was not lost on anyone. Victoria's own live-streamed footage became the biggest piece of evidence against her. Her followers had recorded everything, and now those same recordings were being shared across every platform. No amount of PR spin could explain away what people had seen with their own eyes. Local news stations picked up the story by lunchtime. Breaking. Social media influencer assaults cafe worker flashed across TV screens. Phone cameras had captured the incident from multiple angles, leaving no room for denial or alternative interpretations. Victoria's business partners started distancing themselves quickly. The luxury brands she promoted began removing her content from their pages. Comment sections filled with people saying they would never buy from companies that supported someone like her. But something else was happening too, something more powerful than the negative attention Victoria was receiving. People were sharing stories about Shanice. Regular customers posted about how she remembered their orders, asked about their families, and encouraged their dreams. She helped my grandmother to her seat every morning, one person wrote. She kept an eye on my laptop when I had to take emergency calls, another shared. These stories painted a picture of someone who brought kindness to her community every day, one coffee cup at a time. The contrast between the two women couldn't have been clearer. While Victoria had carefully crafted an image of perfection, Shanice had quietly built genuine connections through real actions and authentic kindness. By late afternoon, Victoria's carefully built social media empire was crumbling. Her follower count dropped by thousands every hour. Brands she had worked with for years were sending out public statements, ending their partnerships. The charity boards she sat on were calling emergency meetings. But the internet wasn't done yet. Someone found an old interview where Victoria had bragged about never facing consequences for her actions. "When you're at my level," she had said, "you make the rules." Those words were now coming back to haunt her. The video kept spreading, reaching international news sites. Headlines appeared in different languages, all telling the same story. How a moment of cruelty exposed the truth behind a carefully constructed facade. Victoria's phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications, each one bringing more bad news. Her assistant had finally quit, sending a company-wide email about toxic work environments. And still, the views on the video kept climbing, the comments kept flowing, and Victoria's reputation kept sinking. The next few days hit Victoria like a tsunami. Her real estate office, usually bustling with activity, sat eerily quiet. Clients called one after another to cancel their contracts. "We found another agency," they would say politely, but everyone knew the real reason. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications from her bank app. Luxury brands demanding refunds for canceled sponsorship deals. Companies she'd worked with for years now wanted nothing to do with her. One particularly expensive skincare brand even released a statement. "Our values do not align with discriminatory behavior of any kind." The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the incident. They dug deeper into Victoria's past, uncovering a pattern of similar behavior that had been swept under the rug. Former employees came forward with their own stories, each one adding another crack to her already shattered reputation. Victoria's attempts to control the damage only made things worse. Her first public statement, written by her crisis management team, came across as insincere. "I was having a bad day," she wrote, but the internet wasn't buying it. "A bad day doesn't make you throw hot coffee at someone," one viral response read. The charity boards she sat on sent polite but firm emails requesting her immediate resignation. These were the same organizations that had once praised her generous donations and public support. Now, they couldn't distance themselves fast enough. Her luxury condo building's residents started avoiding her in the elevator. The exclusive restaurants, where she used to hold court at the best tables, suddenly couldn't find space for her reservations. The social circles she dominated for years closed ranks, leaving her on the outside. The stock price of her real estate company dropped sharply. Investors called emergency meetings, concerned about the company's image. The board members who had once praised her business acumen now questioned her leadership abilities. "We need to think about the company's future," they said. Her social media empire, built over years of careful image management, collapsed in days. Her follower count, once a source of pride, plummeted. Even her most loyal supporters couldn't defend her actions. The carefully edited photos and inspirational quotes she'd posted now attracted only negative comments. Local businesses started putting up small signs in their windows. "All customers treated with respect here." They didn't mention Victoria by name, but everyone knew what and who they meant. At home, Victoria faced another reality. Her household staff, tired of years of similar treatment, quit one by one. Her personal assistant's resignation letter went viral. "I can no longer work in an environment where basic human dignity is not respected." The exclusive country club where she spent her weekends temporarily suspended her membership. Her favorite boutiques, where she'd spent thousands, suddenly stopped sending her invitations to private shopping events. The social calendar that had once been packed with galas and charity events now sat empty. Her phone, which used to buzz constantly with invitations and business opportunities, now only brought bad news. Even her casual acquaintances stopped responding to her messages. The power she had wielded so carelessly had evaporated almost overnight. At night, alone in her expensive penthouse, Victoria finally began to understand something important. Reputation, once broken, couldn't be fixed with money or influence. The carefully constructed world she'd built was collapsing, and for the first time in her life, she couldn't buy her way out of the situation. While Victoria's world crumbled, something beautiful was happening at the Bluebird Cafe. The morning after the incident, a line stretched around the block. People weren't just there for coffee, they were there to show support. Regular customers brought flowers. New faces appeared, having heard about the incident online, wanting to meet the young woman who had handled such a terrible situation with grace. The tip jar overflowed with bills, but more touching were the notes that came with them. "Thank you for your dignity. You inspire us. Keep pursuing your dreams." A local website started a fundraiser for Shanista's nursing school tuition. The goal was $5,000, enough to cover her books for the semester. Within hours, they'd raised 10 times that amount. Small donations poured in from around the world, many accompanied by messages of support. "My daughter wants to be a nurse too," one donor wrote. "You've shown her how to stay strong in the face of prejudice." Another message read, "I've been a nurse for 30 years. We need more people like you in our profession." The fundraiser kept growing, reaching $50,000 by the end of the second day. The cafe owner, Mr. Thompson, called a staff meeting. He announced new anti-discrimination policies, better benefits for employees, and paid leave for anyone who needed time to process traumatic events. "What happened to Shanice made us look hard at how we protect our people," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Local nursing schools reached out with scholarship offers. Hospital administrators sent their business cards. The incident had revealed Shanice's character to the world, and doors began opening. A local hospital's nursing program offered her a guaranteed position after graduation. The cafe itself became a symbol of standing up against discrimination. People started holding meetings there, discussing how to make their community more inclusive. The walls filled with artwork and messages of support. Someone painted a beautiful mural on the side of the building. A coffee cup surrounded by words like dignity, respect, and community. Shanice's coworkers shared stories about her that the cameras hadn't captured. How she stayed late to help new employees learn the ropes. How she kept a stash of protein bars to give to hungry students who couldn't afford both coffee and breakfast. How she never lost her smile, even during the busiest rushes. Local business owners started a mentorship program, inspired by Shanice's story. They offered training and support to young people working their way through school. The program's motto became Dignity Through Education, a direct response to how Shanice had handled herself that day. Community organizations held workshops at the cafe, teaching people how to respond to discrimination. Shanice's calm response became a teaching example. "You don't fight hate with hate," one speaker said. "You fight it by showing who you really are." The cafe introduced a new drink called the Rising Star, all proceeds going to a scholarship fund for working students. It became their most popular order, with customers proud to support the cause. Teachers brought their classes to the cafe for real-world lessons about character and dignity. They pointed to Shanice's story as an example of how one person's grace under pressure could inspire an entire community to become better. Each day brought new signs of support and change. What had started as an ugly incident had transformed into a movement about respect, dignity, and standing together against injustice. The cafe had become more than just a coffee shop. It was now a symbol of hope and community strength. One quiet evening, a month after everything happened, Shanice sat in her favorite corner of the Bluebird Cafe, looking at her phone in disbelief. Her blog post about workplace respect had just hit 1 million views. The comments section was filled with stories from people who'd faced similar situations but hadn't known how to handle them. That same evening, across town, Victoria stared at her own phone screen, but for very different reasons. Her once bustling social media accounts had gone silent. The weekly dinner reservations at fancy restaurants were canceled. Her designer clothes hung untouched in her closet. There were no more charity galas or business meetings to attend. The morning news had just run another story about corporate responsibility, using the coffee incident as an example. Victoria's former business partners watched from their offices, nodding in agreement as experts discussed how one moment of caught-on-camera truth could undo years of carefully built lies. Back at the cafe, something beautiful was happening. The regular customers had started a tradition of writing encouraging notes on their coffee cups before returning them. "Keep shining," one read. "You taught us all something important," said another. The cafe's walls were now covered with these messages, creating a kind of community art project. A young girl came up to Shanice's table, clutching a school notebook. "I wrote my class essay about you," she said shyly. "About how you showed that being kind is stronger than being mean." Shanice gave her a warm hug, remembering how she used to dream about making a difference in the world. She just never expected it would happen quite like this. Victoria's PR team had finally convinced her to make one last public apology. But sitting in front of the camera, her usual confident smile felt forced. "I've learned my lesson," she said, but nobody was listening anymore. The internet had moved on, leaving her behind like yesterday's trending topic. The nursing school acceptance letter sat proudly framed on Shanice's wall at home. Next to it hung a photo of her cafe family. All her coworkers and regular customers gathered together, smiling. The community's support had turned her dream into reality faster than she ever imagined possible. Local business schools now use the incident as a case study. "It's not about the coffee," one professor told his class. "It's about how treating people with respect isn't just the right thing to do, it's also good business." Students nodded, taking notes, understanding that success built on kindness lasts longer than success built on fear. Victoria tried opening a new business in another city, but her reputation followed her online. "Isn't that the coffee lady?" people whispered. Her expensive lifestyle crumbled piece by piece, teaching her that money can't buy real respect. It has to be earned through actions. The Bluebird Cafe had changed too, but for the better. They'd turned the incident into an opportunity, creating a scholarship program for working students. The tip jar now had a sign, "Supporting dreams, one cup at a time." It was always full. Shanice's last blog post of the month summed everything up perfectly. Sometimes life gives you a chance to show who you really are. It might not come when you're ready. It might not come when you're at your best. But in that moment, your true character shines through. and that's something no amount of money or power can fake. As she finished typing those words, sitting in her familiar spot at the cafe, Shanice looked up to see new customers walking in. Her warm smile hadn't changed a bit. If anything, it had grown stronger. Because now she knew for sure that kindness wasn't just the right choice, it was the strongest choice anyone could make.